It's based on a series of trades. It can't be based on individual trades. You drive yourself crazy, Eric.
I used to.
The old saying, study along, study wrong. These guys were so smart that they were too smart. Why do you think the market is open from 9:30 to 4? Because you're supposed to be at work. I don't want you having all day to figure this thing out. Go to work.
So you've been trading for 3 decades. You've been on the floor. You've seen many successful traders, many sucky traders. You're now coaching traders. What is like the number one piece of advice you would give to a new trader?
Number one piece of advice would be to...
So I'm here today with Tony Wilson. He's been trading for 32 years, right? And you're also the author of the book, Take the Trade. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that book and what you do and everything, but I kind of want to talk about your journey because that's the main focus of the podcast. And then eventually we can get into your book and what you do. So
Sure.
32 years ago, floor trading was still popular, right? Or it was still a
Well,
thing.
yeah. Yeah. They worked out of exchanges. And I know you've seen the New York Stock Exchange. But the exchange I worked on was the Pacific Stock Exchange, which was located on 3rd Street and Beaudry in downtown Los Angeles. And we traded equity stocks out of that location. There was also a Pacific Stock Exchange in San Francisco that traded options primarily out of that location.
So why did you choose trading over like every other endeavor? Because I mean, trading's pretty, I don't know what it was like back then, but now it's pretty well known that like most traders fail. So why did you choose trading or get into it?
Well, the reason that I got into trading was I was working for my father's insurance agency back in the late 80s, and I was offered an opportunity to sell mutual funds, but in order to sell mutual funds, you had to have a Series 6 license. But they told me how lucrative the business would be for me because mutual funds were really starting to take off back then. So I did a little research, decided I was going to go for it. And once I really got into the information and started digging through it, I found out that if you got a Series 7, not only could you trade mutual funds, but you could also trade stocks and bonds, all those good things. So I thought, well, if you're going to spend the time to get the 6, you might as well get the 7. You know, little did I know that the 7 was probably the most difficult test to pass at that time. And but anyway, I got sponsored by a small boutique firm, and they, trained me to pass the tests. And thank God, on my very first try, I passed the test. I felt like Michael Jordan coming out of there when he made that game-winning shot against Elo, and he was pumping his fist, and he was pumping his fist, because I did not want to take that test again. That was a very difficult test. It was more difficult than any test I had taken in college. So that's I got an opportunity, like the second day working for that firm. They had a field trip down to the Pacific Stock Exchange. Great. So we went down, and it was great. I mean, it was, they had the floor, and, all the paper tickets were scattered all over the floor, just like you see in all the old films.
Yeah.
All the noise, and people were running back and forth. And I was like, wow, this is really cool, So there happened to be a young lady there at the time who was giving us the tour. And she was a very attractive young lady, and this was before I was married, okay?
So you can say that.
I thought, hey, yeah, I have to put that out there first. So I was thinking that maybe we should, maybe go have lunch sometime. And she said, well, listen, if you're going to talk to me, why don't you fill out this application so it looks like, we're not, spending personal time with each other. So anyway, I filled it out, just really quick, filled it out, and we talked a little bit. And, we finished up the tour and everything. And the next day, my phone rang, and there was a guy named Larry who was the manager there on the floor. And he said, hey, you filled out an application to become a runner on the floor. I said, yeah. He says, hey, can you come down tomorrow morning? And I was like, sure. And came down. He told me about the job, what it did, and it was pretty much a mindless job. It wasn't very important, but, that was a way to get, involved with the different posts and, meet some of the traders down on the floor. So I said, hey, okay, I'll give it a shot. And the next day I started. He told me we start at 6 o'clock in the morning. Excuse me, we start at 5:30 in the morning. And if you come at 5:31, don't matter, showing up because we're going to fire you. So anyway, that next day I got there early. As soon as the guard opened up the lobby, I slept on the couch out in the lobby because I didn't want to be late my first day, So hired me, got me on the floor. And basically what it was, Eric, was they had these different quads, right? These posts. There were like 4 quads, and they had posts inside the quads. And at these different posts, these specialists or the head traders traded their allotted stocks, right? And back in the day, they used these things called pencils. I know you're not familiar with them, but they're
I've heard of them, yeah.
Remember these things called pencils? Yeah. And they had actual little tickets, and you would write down who the trade was with and for how many shares, and they would yell runner, and you'd come by and grab the ticket from them, take it over to the teletype girl. She would type it in, and you'd see it go across the big board, right? That was it. I mean, it wasn't...
Yeah.
It was nothing special at all, but you got the opportunity to be on the floor. And a lot of the traders would pick a lot of the runners up to bring them onto their post as they had openings, and that was your chance to get in. So, Eric, after I talked to a few of the guys down there on the floor, I realized real quick that a couple of things. One, you didn't need to be real bright, but it was very helpful to be the nephew or the son-in-law. That was probably the biggest thing, right? Because a lot of those guys down, I realized that I was like, this guy's not smarter than me. He's not smarter than me. How's he down here doing this? How's he participating in this activity? Yeah. Why is he here? I mean, he's not smart, So anyway, I figured I'll stick around. Let's see if I can get picked up. So after about 6 months as a runner, I finally got picked up as a clerk, and I started clerking, keeping positions. They didn't have all this technology that we have today where we could trade on our cell phones and all that. That was not available. Okay, so we literally kept positions on a notepad. We would write, we'd pull out the notepad and, we write down we're long 500, we're short 300, we're long 200, and that's how you kept track of your positions, right? So anyway, that went on for a little while. I got a chance to, work at a couple of different posts, which was great, as clerk. And then eventually I made it up to an assistant and got a chance to trade a few stocks. But what I realized, Eric, as a clerk, one of the first days as a clerk, I saw a figure on this old, what used to be called Quotron machines. And it was, I don't know, $86,350 or something to that effect. And I asked one of the guys, I said, wow, is that how much money we've made this year? And he started laughing. He said, that's how much money we made today. And I said,
gosh.
I'm in the right business right now.
And back then, that was
This was
probably like,
this was 1990. Yeah, this was
yeah.
1990. I was like, oh, I'm in the right business. So that's kind of it. After that, I was off to the races, man. I wasn't going to do much else.
But did you ever? Maybe I'm missing part of this, but did you ever trade by yourself or?
So what happened? Stayed down there for a few years, and then I got an opportunity to
Mhm.
go to Phoenix, Arizona, 24th and Camelback. There was a spot there with Charles Schwab, which I had worked for Charles Schwab on the floor at one of their posts
Uh-huh.
for a little while, I think maybe about 6 months or so. And they said, hey, they got some new openings out in Phoenix, and you'll get paid, your California wages in Arizona. And I was thinking to myself, that might be a good opportunity. So I went down there, interviewed. They were going to put me on the bond desk, which I was really excited because back in the day, Eric, the smart guys worked in the bond department. Now, if you were on the bond desk, you were a smart guy. If you were in equities, it was like, what happened, man? How did you
Oh,
get
really?
stuck down there? You know, what are you, a dummy? They
I
put
don't
you
know
in
anyone.
equities? Oh,
Yeah. I don't know
but you
anyone in
got to remember
bonds.
all the big monies in bonds. I mean, like the huge monies in bonds. People who just live on interest. I mean, they have hundreds of
Hmm.
millions of dollars, because they're only looking to get, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5%. Because on $100 million, that's a lot of money. So that's where the big players are at. So anyway, I got stuck in a department called Schwab 500, and it was the 500 most active traders. So they figured since I was accustomed to working on the trading floor, that working with Schwab's most active traders should be, a walk in the park. Which it was. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed the different characters that would call in. And these guys, a lot of them for the East Coast, and they had the real heavy accent,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I got it. I got it. It was fun. I had a good time. I left from there. I think I was there. Let's see, I was there till 93, 92, 92, I believe. I left. I went to work for a little small institutional firm. They sent me to New York, and they taught me. I guess they put me on one of these testing programs, right? They wanted to find out what my personality was like. So I guess
Oh.
they figured, hey, this guy's got this A-type personality. Let's go ahead and send him off to New York. And I got a chance to be trained by some really good trainers there. And when I came back, I was ready to go, and started trading, which was really nice with an unlimited account, which is really cool to have an account where you could just buy as much. Well, pretty much. You can't buy, I mean, you couldn't buy like 1 billion shares, but I mean,
Yeah.
whatever you wanted to get, you had enough equity. I mean, you had enough cash at your disposal. You could trade. You didn't have to worry about the amount of money. So that was great. That was fun. Up until they got mad that I was making more money than the general manager, and they wanted to change the comp plan, which I did
Uh-huh.
not care for at all. I did not like that. So anyway, wound up after a while figuring that I probably need to leave and go out on my own so I won't have these
Uh-huh.
problems, and went home. Bought these old monitors. Well, they weren't old, but I mean, compared to what we have today, the big, with the tubes in the back. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I hired this real smart guy, and he figured out a way where I could take my mouse and I could go from one screen to the other screen. It was just two separate screens, but I could go from one screen to the other screen, which I thought was really cool for back then. And I had a T1 line that came to the house, which I had to pay extra for that.
Hmm.
And I just took my little bit of money that I had, and well, it was a decent amount, and I just did what I had been trained to do, and it was it was awesome, man. I had a few little hiccups along the way. Wifey wanted to leave and go live with her mother and take the kids a couple of times, but we got past that. I was able to salvage that, get back on track, and do pretty good. It's funny. People talk about trading and how difficult it is, and
yeah,
for some reason, to me, it doesn't seem difficult. For me, it kind of comes. I don't know. Some people are real good at math. Some people are real good at science or history. For whatever reason, I see these charts and they make perfect sense to me based upon the way I was trained. And I've tried to show my wife and the kids and my brother, and I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. It looks like you're playing a video game. This is nonsense. But to me, it makes perfect sense. And because of that, been able to pay off a couple of mortgages, lots of cars, sent my daughter to USC. She doesn't have any student loans.
That's awesome.
It's been really cool. We traveled a lot. Yeah, it's been really cool. It's been a really cool lifestyle. And
how long? So how long from when you started to when you started trading by yourself? How long is that period?
That's been say 2003. Yeah. So about 20 years by myself. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's like 12 years before you started trading by yourself.
Well, yeah,
Correct?
I was trading for the different firms. Yeah. Yeah. It was really
Okay.
That was a good time. That was a good time because I got a chance to really learn, and I think that's the problem with a lot of individuals that are attempting to trade now. They really don't understand that you really need time for some seasoning to occur. You really need to get some experience before you really become successful at this thing. I mean, you don't just pick up a basketball and 2 days later you're playing in the NBA. But for some reason, people come into this space and they think, well, hey, I read the book, I took the course. How come I'm not making $1,000 a day? Yeah, what's going on here?
Yeah, I see it all the time online. But I mean, you had 12 years of training essentially before you started trading on your own. But how long do you think it took you before you knew like how to trade successfully? If you remember.
Probably last week.
I know it was a while ago.
Last week.
Just now. Hey, even that would be impressive. I mean,
oh, I felt very confident when I left the institution. I felt very confident that I could do this on my own. When I was at Schwab, one of the main reasons why I left Schwab was because of I wanted to trade, right? And but they had this thing called compliance. And every time you wanted to send a trade in, they had to go through compliance. And that was, by the time I got the approval, it was like, forget it.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So you couldn't do like day trading or quick trades?
No, you could swing. You could do some swing trades, if that was something. But I had learned from being on the floor and then working with the guys in 500. We were in and out. We were in and out, managing trades and going through these different methods and concepts, using what I learned. I helped a lot of guys when I was in Schwab 500 and got so much to where it was an open phone line where whoever was available would pick up. Well, it got to the point where people would call in, and if I didn't pick up, they'd say, "Hey, it's Tony there," which kind of, caused a little bit of problem with my coworkers. Hey, Tony, it's for you. Hey, Tony, it's for you.
It's just a stack of phones on your desk.
Not quite, but it seemed like that because these guys, they wanted to talk to me, But again, at Schwab, we weren't supposed to give any advice, and I didn't give any advice. I just helped
Mm-hmm.
them understand what the process was and what was going to happen. One guy wanted to, he had 25,000 shares he had to get rid of. I said, well, you do not put in an order to sell 25,000 shares. I said, we got to piece this thing off. And I would work the guys through the system and say, this is how you're going to prevent slippage from occurring, So I
Yeah.
would teach them a lot of things. So therefore it was like, well, I want Tony. I want Tony. I want Tony. So that became a little bit of an issue. Anyway.
So what's the biggest thing that you learned to in that beginning period to get you to that point where you were so confident, everyone wanted to learn from you, you were helping so many people?
Well, to me, Eric, I like I was saying before, I don't think it's complicated. And I wanted to try and make things very simple to understand. I wanted to put it in layman's terms so they could understand things, very easily. I think Wall Street forever has been this mysterious place with these big words and all these complicated terms to keep you from thinking that you couldn't do it. Just leave it up to us pros and just give us the money and we'll handle this thing. And
Yeah.
I was telling someone the other day, I said, why do you think the market is open from 9:30 to 4? And he said, I don't know why. I says, because you're supposed to be at work during those hours. I don't want you.
That's funny. I never thought about that.
I don't want you having all day to figure this thing out. Go to work. I'll figure it out. I'm the professional. Just give me your money and I'll keep my commissions and stay rich and keep you, depositing money into your account. That's the
Yeah.
job of a stockbroker, right? At least that was the job of a stockbroker. They're all dinosaurs now. But, I just wanted to make things simple. And I just took terms that I thought, anybody should be able to understand this. If you really wanted to, I'll try to make it as simple as I possibly can for you. So I just took what I learned in New York and just kind of laid it out for, a lot of individuals who were interested in learning, and I would just help them out, and I would show them things. Technology, the internet had come around back in the 2000s. By the way, we had the internet, all this good stuff. So, I would talk to the guys on the phone and I would say,
Yeah.
okay, you see the 200 period moving average, put that in. Okay, now see how it's bumping up against it. See how it's bumping up against it. Okay, so it's finding a lot of resistance there. Okay, now if it breaks through, and if it breaks through with a decent sized candle, believe me, that's not, your buddies trade going through. That's institutional money going through. That's creating that candle. Okay, so that means they have an interest in making that thing move. So I would explain it to them in those terms, and they go, "Oh, okay, that makes sense, Tony." Yeah, I mean, think about it. If they gapped it down first thing in the morning, that means that people, as soon as it starts to move up, people are going to start selling to get their money out of that. As soon as it gets back up to that 200, they're going to sell. They want their money out. So again, it's going to cause a big sell-off. Oh, that makes sense. So just my my grandparents, they were from the South. They were very simple people. Sixth grade, eighth grade educations. But those are some of
uh,
the smartest people that ever walked the planet because they were just very observant of what was going on, right? They observed what was going on in the world, what they couldn't make out intellectually, on a higher level. They just use plain old common sense. So I try to apply the same methods and concepts in trading. and it's worked. It's done. It's worked. I'm really happy with the results that my students have had. They're doing great. I had one of my students today called up and said, "Hey, I caught that reversal of today, man, just like you taught it, man. It was awesome, and I was up 30%. Great, fantastic. That's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear. Yeah.
So when you say it was never really difficult for you, did you never really go through a period where you felt like you didn't understand it, or like you wanted to give up, or like nothing just made sense to you? Or was it just you kind of just you got it quickly, I guess?
It it made sense to me. Where I struggled was when I transitioned from working for a firm where I could just buy whatever it is I wanted to buy in the amounts
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to buy them in. As an
Yeah.
individual, I couldn't do that. So those habits had to die, or else I was going to die, or my account was going to die. And and I struggled there. That you know, coming in on an opening trade, buying, you know, 5,000 shares, when you're using your money, which you know,
It's different, yeah.
it's a lot different. So instead of 5,000 shares, now I can only buy 300 shares, you know, and and even then, I had to dial back how aggressive I could be, because when you're working for a firm, Eric, and we take a loss, the firm takes the loss. When you're working for yourself and you take a loss, you take a loss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big difference. So it took me a little while to make that adjustment. And, my wife was not excited about that adjustment period at all. That's what, she was kind of talking about maybe taking the kids and going hanging out with her mom for a little while until I could figure things out. So, but I was able
Oh.
to talk her down off the ledge.
Well, that's good because that's almost impressive that you were able to keep that
Uh,
relationship good and still like be successful from trading, because I'm sure both of those things were hard to do, especially
it
simultaneously.
was, yeah, it was quite a juggling act to, but you know what? I'll tell you, it made me grow up. It made me become a lot more mature. I was, even as a kid, they always thought I was the oldest kid in the group, and I was always the youngest kid in the group because I always act as if I was some old man. Now I got my old man beard, but it made me become more mature, with my family. I have a son and daughter, and my wife. At that time, I think we had been married maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe longer. But you know, I had known her from high school, so we knew each other, and she trusted me. And I just said, if you trust me, I'll do my best, and I will give you 100% of my effort. Which, I played sports, all my life. My dad played professional sports. My uncle played professional sports. I've been in that arena before, so I knew how to be
Yeah.
competitive, and I knew what it took to win. So I knew I had to just buckle down and, you know, use some discipline, go back to the structure that I was taught, the concepts, the principles that I was taught, and be true to them, be true to myself. When I put a stop in my book, that means that's where the stop is. No giving in, no saying, oh, I'll give it another, I'll give
Yeah.
it another 5 minutes. No, none of that. So, and I just I dialed back a lot of the aggressiveness, and I just worked on just building the account slowly, and
Hmm.
which can be kind of tough again because you're coming from a situation where you had, unlimited resources pretty much. It's where now I really got to scale back and I've got to be smart about this. And, it took some adjusting, but I got there because I had to. I mean, if I wanted to keep my family together, I had to make the adjustments. So it worked out. It worked out.
Dang. So trading was your only source of income then, sounds like.
Well, I've done some other things. Like I said in the beginning, I was in the insurance business. I'd done mortgages. What else have I done? Later on, I got involved. I have a partner, and we were importing, exporting some sporting goods. So again, I was in sports. So out of China, we would fly over to China and do some importing of sporting good products we'd bring over here. I mean, I've done a few different things, because the thing about trading is that it can become a little bit boring and a little bit monotonous and lonely. It's a lonely business. It's a very lonely business. But now you guys have a lot of people to talk to. You've got all these programs, these chats going on, all these things. I mean, the only thing we had was CNBC, and I would mute it because I didn't want it skewing my thoughts. So I would just mute it. So, I mean, I'd turn my music on in my office and I would just play music, It's a lonely business.
Yeah, which is funny because, like, I think you commented on my post from the Wall Street Bets group, if I'm remembering correctly, which, like, that group has, like, how many people? 200,000 or something like that members, which, like, that's a lot of people that are, like, trading or into stocks.
Yeah.
I wanna ask though about the floor trading, because you must have seen some, like, really great traders, and you must have seen some that weren't that good.
Yes.
What is the main difference between the two that you've seen?
Probably the difference was that the guys who were like highly educated, big time college pedigree guys were not as sharp and not as smart as the old school guys who just kind of grew up in the streets and were just tough guys that just had to figure it out. There was one guy down there, I'll never forget his name. His name was Bruce Pally, and just no Jewish guy. He wore these same brown shoes every day. He drove a station wagon. I know you don't know what a station wagon is, but he drove a station wagon to work.
I know what it is, yeah.
But you know what a station wagon is? Okay. He would, he would have a Christmas party every year in a place called the Malibu Colony where Lee Majors lived back there. I mean, he would have like Salvador Dali paintings on the wall, but the guy wore the same thing to work every day. But he was just a hard-nosed guy. He put some tape on his glass. He wouldn't spend any money to buy a new pair of glasses,
funny.
But he was just We had another character down there, Cy. Cy had that sleep apnea thing where he would fall asleep like on the floor. He'd be up at his post and his head would just be cocked back and and then they would ring his phone and he would pick the phone up. They would mess with him. They would ring his phone. He'd pick the phone up, hello, 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 and everybody would laugh. But those guys were smart. I mean, they were really smart. One weekend, I got a chance to go on a trip over to what's the name of that little island over there? Santa. There's a little island, no, I forget it'll come to me in a minute. But I got a chance to spend some time with Cy, and really, he was a New York guy. I remember the first time he called me on the phone to place an order, and he was like, "Buy 1,000 burgers at the Figure." Hung the phone up. It's like, I
What the
asked,
hell does that mean?
I asked, "Hey, what does that mean? Buy 1,000 burgers at the Figure?" Or meant to buy 1,000 shares of McDonald's. The figure would be the actual round number, right? So back then we were on the the British we weren't on the decimal system that we're on today. So you would buy at an 8,
All right.
at a
Yeah.
quarter, 3/8, at a half, at
That's crazy.
5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and at the figure.
Those are
So
the hand
yeah,
signals.
they would. Yeah, those are all the hand signals. Yeah. So buy 1,000 burgers at the figure.
So that's
But he was an
funny.
old school guy from New York.
So the people that it's almost as if having a proper education was almost like a impediment
Handicap.
to a handicap.
Yeah.
That's what you've
Yeah.
noticed?
Yeah. I mean, not that they weren't smart. They weren't intelligent people. They're very intelligent people. But sometimes, the old saying, study along, study wrong. These guys were so smart that they were too smart for their own good. And the old guys who just grew up in the streets, just grew up there in the pits and what have you, and back east, they came out here and they were working the floor and they were really good. They were really good. I'm sure, like the guy who I worked for, I mean, just little short dude, man, he was something else. But I mean, they were just hardworking guys. They were hardworking guys. They knew they weren't going to be there forever. They worked really hard. They made a heck of a lot of money, and then they left. And you could see them one after another. They were starting to leave. Before I left and went to Arizona, one of my buddies I called back one day. And he said, "Tony, if you came down here, you wouldn't even recognize it anymore." He said, "All the old guys, they've all left, either died or they've just retired and moved on because they made their money and they moved on because the stress of the job was just, they were just keeling over,
Yeah.
just falling over, dying, So when you made your money, they wanted to just get out of there and go enjoy their life, So anyway, that was kind of the nature of being down there and being around those folks. But it was a great experience. I wouldn't have traded for anything in the world. I still have a buddy today that I met him there, and I still see him, I don't know, a couple of times a month. We still get together and go play golf and, talk about old times.
What was that saying you brought up? Trade or train long, trade wrong. Is that what you said?
Study long, study wrong.
What is that? I've never heard that.
Guys would overthink it.
That's essentially what it means.
They'd overthink things. The old school guys, they would see it and they just pull the trigger. They just pull the trigger. They take the trade.
So it's more.
So the guys trying to slip the trigger out.
So it's more like the intuitive trading versus someone trying to overanalyze, put like 20 different things. Well, I guess back then you didn't have charts, but okay.
Well, we had a book that we got from Investors Business Daily. It came weekly. Of course, it had been printed, a week ago. It was a little printed book, IBD, and it was a line chart. Yeah, and there was a line chart. It wasn't even candlesticks. I mean, you had to look at this thing and kind of scratch your head and go, "Okay, all right."
That's so crazy.
I wish I had kept one of those. I have to look through,
It's probably
my
worth
garage one
something
day.
now.
Go out. Oh man, we would just throw them. We throw them in the trash. We look at them for a while. We throw them away. And if I only had known, just hang on to some of those
Yeah.
tickets, all of that stuff. I should have hung on to some of that stuff. Would have been really cool.
But cuz sometimes I feel like that cuz I've been training for 6 years and I'm still not like consistently profitable. I've seen some success, but like sometimes I
Okay.
do feel like uh I'm I forgot the study. Sometimes I feel like I'm studying long, studying wrong, like cuz I do put a lot of time in. Um
Okay.
so like recently, I mean, I'm listening to an audiobook right now. I don't know the title of it, but it's essentially it teaches you how to learn cuz like there's a correct way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. So I'm just
Okay.
trying to be more open minded to me potentially doing things wrong. Cause like I could if I keep doing the same thing and it's not working and like I don't change anything, I might eventually get there like super slowly. But uh, yeah, that's just I feel like that
Well,
saying kind of resonated with me.
oh, okay. Well, sometimes you start seeing things that aren't even there. I mean, it's
Yeah,
this uh, this whole concept of understanding the charts. Once I went to I'll tell you, once I went to New York, I really got trained really well because I was in the room with guys who were there, who were guys that gone to Princeton and Wharton School of Business. Here I am, a guy out of Cal State, and I'm a state college guy, and I'm in here with
yeah,
all these top colleges, and the only one who looks like me too at the time, and I wasn't
yeah,
intimidated at all. I mean, I played, highest level of college, Division One. I was like, I'm not intimidated at all. I mean, but it was explained to me in such a way that it just made sense. So then I just tried to explain it to my uh, students the same way. This is what you want to look for. Here's the setups. You want to wait. You want to be patient until the setup occurs, and when the setup occurs, just take trade. Don't think about it. Just do it. Put your stop in, and you put the stop in. I don't really put them in the system. I write them down in my journal. I journal everything,
hmm
and I teach them to do the same thing. I said because you're going to go back and you're going to start seeing patterns that are occurring over and over and over again. I trade the same 10 stocks every day.
okay,
I don't have a scanner that gives me the hot stocks of
yeah,
what's making new highs and making new lows, and I don't do any of that. I mean, I wasn't taught that way. I was taught that when we worked on the trading floor, if you traded, you know, Merck, then that was your stock, and you were at post four and you traded Merck Pharmaceutical. The guy at post five, he can't trade Merck. That's your stock. That's the stock you trade.
mm,
Now he can trade his stocks that he's allocated to trade, but you have your stocks and you trade your stocks, and that's where you make your money. And it just made perfect sense to me. All right. So I just trade my same stocks. I tell my students I like to see them trade at least five, well, at least three, no more than five. And then we can work up to 10, but let's trade somewhere between three and five, learn the characteristics of those stocks. And I mean, like Micron Technology, symbol MU, I've been trading that stock since 1999.
that's crazy.
That's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I could trade. I had a trade. I had a trade in Micron today. It was a nice trade. It was a really nice trade. It was simple. It was simple, And I was done. Gosh, it must have been What? 35 minutes, 36 minutes. I was done.
That's the freedom of trading.
Love it.
That's like the ultimate goal.
We were in last year, we were in Turks and Caicos on vacation, and my wife was in the room, and I went down to go have breakfast. I took my laptop with me. So I'm sitting down, I'm looking out at this gorgeous turquoise beach, just beautiful water. And I'm sitting there at the table, just looking out at it. And my wife walks up. She says, "Hey, I thought you said you weren't going to do that while you were here." I said, "Honey, I just paid for half of our trip just here eating breakfast."
Dang,
and she was
yeah,
like, "Oh,
yeah.
well, keep going, keep going, keep going."
She's like, "Wait, can you do that one more time?" That's awesome.
Oh, man.
So
It's a great business.
How long have you been coaching people, traders?
Not long, just a few years. Just kind of fell into it. Just kind of just kind of haphazardly. It just kind of happened. You know, just some young kids were on one of these platforms, and I heard them, and they were very interested in trading, and they were making a ton of mistakes, and I just said, "Well, hey, you might want to do this and look for that and try this." And then all of a sudden, everybody got real quiet. And then I started noticing every time I'd say, "Well, you might want to look for this when you see that happen, and that'll tell you what type of setup you've got." And after that, they were like, "Hey, can you come on and talk to us about some things?" And then it just kind of evolved from there and just down and took off. But my brother had been egging me on to do this for years. He's the one who challenged me to write the book and everything. Because he knows I'm a sucker. I used to be a football coach too. I used to coach youth football, and I coached them all the way up into high school. My kids, and I call them all my kids, but they're just my son was playing. But I had this same group. Matter of fact, I think I got my poster. There's the poster of my guys right there, undefeated. There, Eric, 2008. Undefeated.
Good job.
Went from 0-10. When I got them, they were 0-10. We went from 0-10 to 10-0. First championship win in 23 years for our city. Our city hadn't won a championship in 23 years.
What grade?
They were, when I got them, they were 8 years old. And when I finished with them, they were 13.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a long time
to... Up football. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I played football also. And nice. My record was also, I never played that much. I was always on the sidelines, which kind of sucks. But our record freshman year was like 0-12. We didn't win our first game until sophomore year, the very last game. So we lost every single game until the very last game of sophomore year. That was it was not good.
Wow, that's a long drought. That's a long drought.
Honestly, that kind of feels like my trading.
But I told the kids, kind of like the kids in the room, I said, "You know what?" I said, "We're not going to keep losing." I said, "You guys, you're going to have to get over the losing thing because I'm not used to losing." I said, I'm used to winning, and it might take us a little time, but we'll get there. And it did. It took us about 3 years before we started playing in championship games and playoffs and championships. But after that, I mean, we were a force to be reckoned with, because just like with trading, it takes time. You have, like I was saying earlier, you don't just pick up a basketball and 2 days later you're in the NBA. It doesn't work like that. You really do have to be trained. You need to be properly trained. I took the kids from, the coach before, he would give them water breaks, and when they messed up, he'd make them run laps. And I used to think to myself, wait a minute, is this a cross-country team or is this a football team? Why are they running laps? Should they be learning how to play football? And why are they taking these long water breaks? You know, So when I got them the following year, when you messed up, I made you do push-ups right here by my feet, and then you go right back in. And when you wanted to drink water, I put water at all the stations. So when you wanted water, you just reached down, grabbed the water bottle, and you kept learning. We didn't have
breaks.
time for you to run laps and take breaks. That didn't make any sense to me. Same thing like with trading. I mean, there's just things here that they don't make sense. I look at some of these traders' charts, and they've got so many indicators and lines on there, I can't even see the candlesticks. I'm like, where are the candlesticks at, man? You got like 14 lines, indicators going. Moving out. What's all this stuff? I've got 3 moving averages on there, and that's it. Just keep it simple.
Is that how you?
That's what I did for the kids. I kept it simple.
What do you think? Because I feel like losing is like a very important part of learning, right? There's a trader, Tom Hugard. He has a book called Best Loser Wins, where he essentially talks about this, where like in trading, if you want to be successful, you have to be someone who can like lose successfully, basically. Be someone that can take a loss and continue to trade and not let it affect your next like 20 trades, like, commonly happens. Do you agree with that? Like with, I guess, just in trading and outside of trading, like you said, the Pop Warner, they didn't win a single game, but also in trading, like you can take a lot of losses too before you start to see any sort of results or any sort of like lessons. Be like, oh, this kind of actually makes sense now.
That L is meant to be a lesson. That's a loss, but that L stands for lesson. Hopefully you'll learn a lesson from that. You won't do it again. You'll learn from it, the only thing you can really control, if you think about it as a trader, the only thing you can really control is the amount of money you lose. That's it. You can't control how much money you make. When the stock takes off and it runs and you're on the right side of the trade, you don't go, oh, no, slow down. You don't do that, right? But and there's no, and you don't have the wherewithal, you don't have the resources, to make the stock continue to go. You don't have that. I mean, unless you're, I don't know, Warren Buffett. I mean, I don't know, but I got that kind of money, but I don't, So the only thing I can control is when to get out of the trade. Get out of the trade. Kill the trade. Kill the trade. Kill the trade. Kill the trade. And when I learned how to kill the trade properly, I mean, not just randomly, that I have a structured plan on how I get out of a trade every single time. I don't wing it. There's a process. There's a method by which I get out of all my trades, and, I have maximum losses that I'm willing to take. I set up my stops. I write them down in my book, and I set them up in the exact same place every single time. And I'm always, the hardest thing, I think, for most traders is to really be true to that stop. You wrote that stop down, then you got to abide by it. You can't say, well, I know I said 85 and now it's at 84 and 84.75 or 84.55 or 84.30, but it's going to come back. No, none of that. That we will have none of that. No, because you can always take another trade. Success is not based upon one trade. I tell my students this all the time. Success is based upon a series of trades. When you can look back, like if I have a 65% win rate, then I don't worry about taking a loss on this trade. This one trade can't be any more important than the next trade I'm going to take. It can't be, or I'm going to be a loser. There's no way I'm going to be able to survive in this business if I have any other thought process. No one trade is more important than any other trade. They're all the same. And I look back at the end of the week and I say, do I have more money in my P&L than at the end of the week than I had at the beginning of the week? If the answer is yes, and it was a successful week. Mm-hmm. It's based on a series of trades. It can't be based on individual trades. You drive yourself crazy, Eric.
I used to.
It can't be.
Yeah.
I know.
So how do you determine success in trading?
I think you determine it based upon your percentages. It's got to be measurable, obviously. You got to be able to say, I was able to take out, 35% this week. That was pretty good week. I was able to take out 20%, 15%, 20%, whatever the number happens to be, and then be able to do that week in and week out. And never get too excited when you see your P&L start to move, okay, in either direction. Not just watching it go up and get excited, but when it goes down, you got to be able to kill the trade, right? So you're never going to let that get out of control. But say you're having a big day and you're up 5, 6, 7, 8 grand. You don't get big-headed and say, hey, well, now on my next trade, I'm going in 10,000 shares. No.
Yeah.
No, still coming in with 300 shares, but, 500 shares, same thing over and over again. Then when you get to a certain point, because of the size of your account, now you got to trade in lots of 1,000 pretty much. Because you need to make enough money, but it's got to make sense, right? So now you're trading 1,000 share lots, which, you really have to pay attention, right? You really have to be disciplined.
Yeah.
You really have to have structure in place because things can go south on you in a hurry. Those red candles come fast, So you got to have your hot keys ready to go, and you kill trades, and you just. Yeah, I was wrong. I was talking to a group the other day, and I told them, I said, well, I got stopped out 3 times today. And they're like, whoa. You got stopped out 3 times? Yeah, I was wrong. You were wrong? Yeah. Wrong a lot. But I have a system. Again, it's based upon a series of trades. It's not based on one trade. No one trade is more important than the other. They all carry the same amount of value to me. So I was wrong on that. I got stopped out. I'm waiting for my next setup. Boom, I take the trade, write my stop down, my journal. It starts to move up. It starts to, say that, hey, you're right about this particular trade. Okay, I add to my position. I have a certain way of adding to my trades. I have a certain way of taking profits. Everything is structured. Nothing is left, to guessing or thinking or thoughts, feelings, and all this good stuff. Yeah. Everything is structured. Oh, I hit my number. All right. 50%. Well, okay. I got 50% left. Okay. I pull out another 25. Okay. I'm out. I've got 25 left.
Yeah.
All right. I'll leave that in as a runner. Let's see what happens with that. If I break my moving average, then I'm out. If not, I'll just let it continue to run. And that's how you make money in this business. If you don't approach this business from that thought process, you're not going to have a chance. If you just do random things every day, every day is just some random thing that you come up with, you got no shot.
Yeah.
You got no shot.
Yeah. I want to ask really quickly, you don't have to get like too in depth, but so you trade using the moving averages. You said 3 moving averages.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's how you've been trading for a long time.
Since early 2000s, yeah.
Okay. Is that how you were like taught?
I don't use the Mac. Yeah, I don't use the MACD and the VWAP and you know all these things. RSI. I hear the kids talking about it, but I don't use it.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. I was just curious. There's a lot. I don't know how far you go onto like trading communities online, but there's like a lot of people that hate on people that use indicators. Like they say it's not. Well, there's people that hate on every type of trader, right? There's people that if you use
Yeah,
patterns, they hate on you. If you use indicators, they hate on you. If you use whatever else, book map or whatever other type of trading, um, but commonly like indicators is thought as like retail trading, which is why everyone decides to hate on it because they're like, oh, that's like simple basic stuff. Like you can't make money with that, but like you're making money with it. There's
I use moving averages. Yeah, I use three moving averages, and that's fine, and it works for me, and it always has worked for me. I don't really look at a chart without it, and I try to keep my charts as clean as possible. I don't like a lot of noise on my screen. I need to
yeah,
be able to think and see and be able to visualize and recognize what the setups are happening, what they're trying to do. You
uh
know,
huh,
when you're working with institutions, when you're at an institution and you can move a lot of size, you can look at a candle and you can know what's going on, who's that. That's that's not my drinking buddies right there. That's you know, that's Goldman Sachs. Okay, that's BlackRock. Okay.
yeah,
That's not my drinking buddies that made that candle appear, okay?
no.
You know. So, and
So,
that's what I teach my guys, man.
uh, I want to talk about your book now.
Okay.
So there's a lot of trading books out there. What made you Yeah, what made you write that book?
My brother put me up to it.
Okay.
He challenged me and said I couldn't do it. He said, "Hey, you know you're getting kind of old. You might want to write something down."
Leave something behind.
Yeah.
So I didn't I didn't read the book, but I read the
Hmm.
description. It sounds like a technical analysis book
Yeah,
mainly.
it's basically technical analysis, very simplified version of technical analysis. I will get you a
Okay.
PDF version. I'll get you over you guys are into the e stuff. I'll get you an ebook, or I'll tell you what. If
I
you see
do.
me in office,
I
if
have
you
my
see,
Kindle right here.
oh, do you? Okay, all right. There you go.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get send me the address. I'll make sure I'll get the ebook out to you.
So you go over like the three moving averages and stuff in there.
Yeah, I go over, you know, I start off with the, you know, the type of approach that I want to take when I'm thinking about trading, what I'm, you know, I talk about keeping things simple, right? I go over the Japanese candlesticks, you know. I was
Mm.
telling some of my students, I had I had gone on YouTube when I was working with them when I first started with them because they kept saying, "Well, we're learning stuff on YouTube. We're learning stuff on YouTube."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay." So I went on YouTube and I said, "Okay, well, I'll pull up candlesticks," and I put Japanese candlesticks in, and this guy came on and he started talking about Japanese candlesticks, and within 3 minutes, I was completely lost, Eric. I was like, "Wait a minute! I've been doing this for like."
That's
A
funny.
really long time. And this guy, within 3 minutes, I'm totally lost. You know, so
Uh,
I'm wondering why. What are the kids thinking that if I'm lost, they must be like completely confused. You know, so I go over candlesticks. I make it real simple. I explain how you know what they are, what they mean. You know, when they're being produced. You know what they're telling you. Um, I go over the moving averages, of course.
Yeah.
I go over stops, and why stops are super important. Like I was telling you earlier, it's one of the few things that you can control is how much money you lose. So having stops and being true to those stops, I mean, discipline with those stops is it's critical. Without that, you got nothing. Like you were saying, your guy said the best thing you can do is the best loser wins, or something to that effect. You were
Best
saying
loser
it's true.
wins.
Hands down, I give him all praises. Yes, he's 100% correct. 100% correct. Um, and I talk about management. How do you manage the trade when you're in a successful trade? The trade has given you the signal that okay, you're in the right position now. You you you've taken the right trade. Okay, how do I add to my trade? Okay, how do I
Mm-hmm.
improve? How do I improve my position size? How do I take profits? How do I scale out? At what levels? What is my predetermined numbers that I have based upon the price of the stock? How many shares of the stock I have. When you're long 10,000 shares, you just can't sell 10,000 at the market. You don't do that.
Yeah.
It causes a little bit of a problem. Um, so you need to have plans in place of how do I scale out? How do I sell into the strength? Okay. I want to make sure I'm not, selling um, too premature, but I want to make sure that I don't want to overstay my welcome as well, you know. And there's a little bit of a balancing act, a little bit of a dance that you're kind of doing, that you kind of get better as the more time you spend in the chair and in trades,
Mm-hmm.
you become better with. I'm trading with Micron today, and I'm just stepping him up, stepping him up, stepping him up. And I go, okay, all right, you want to take a little break? Okay, I know this is about the time you like to take a break. Okay, fine. It takes a little break. And you want to step up a little, okay, you want to step up a little more, you want to step up a little more. Okay, all right, fantastic. By that time, I'm only, 25% of my position at that point anyway. I've already booked my profits. So, so all those, all those rules, all those concepts, those methods, you incorporate that whole process into a trade. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just I got in at 50 and I got out at 51.
Yeah.
What's that? You know, what's that? How'd you manage the trade? Tell me
Yeah,
that.
that's not.
Everybody wants to
That's
tell me
just
about
like
how I got in at 50 and got out at 50. Yeah, how'd you manage it? How would you along the way? How'd you add to the position? How'd you scale out of that position? Did you have any slippage on that? I mean, what'd you do? How long? I mean, did you start out real aggressive and then you slowed it down, or did you just start out kind of tentative and then you got aggressive? And tell me about the trade. Tell me about the trade. Very few can tell you about the trade. They all want to tell you about how much money. Oh, I made a lot of money. Okay, all right. So tell me about it.
that's
Well,
true.
I got in here and I got out there. No, tell me about the trade. Tell me how you managed the trade. Not a lot I can tell you. Very few. Yeah.
Also on social media, people will post, "Here's how I made this much. Here's how I made $1,000 in 10 minutes." But they won't really tell you. They'll say like what you did. Oh, I entered here and then I sold here. They make it look very simple. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, right. Like, obviously, if you
Uh,
buy and it goes up, you make money, but that didn't teach me anything.
yeah. You made money in spite of yourself.
I have like one more question for you, but I wanna ask, uh, is there anything you want to talk about before I ask you my last question?
Well, I'd like for everyone to go out and get my book. I think it's a really good read. Or it's a
Yeah.
It's not a long. It's not a long read. It's 128 pages, but it's a good read. I think
Oh,
it will
okay.
build a foundation, help you build a foundation for your trading, and it'll give you some different ideas about what it takes to be consistent. And I think that's what
Mm-hmm.
everyone needs to really concern themselves with. Not so much being profitable right away, which, I mean, if you are consistent, you will be profitable. Even if you're a consistent loser, if you're consistent at losing just that same dollar amount every time, at some point you'll start dialing it back to all of a sudden, I don't lose anymore. And now all of a sudden, oh, now I'm making a little bit. Oh, and I'm making a little bit more now, So you're really working toward consistency. That's really the name of the game. And I think I even say it in the subtitle, uh, Flow Trader's Guide to Making Money Every Day in Any Market, Consistent Profits in 30 Days. Well, yeah, you can do that. You just need to follow the rules. I got the guys in my Facebook group, they're always, they're saying, you know what? All I did was I just followed the rules, Mr. Tony. I just followed the rules. Okay. As long as you know the rules of engagement, when you know the rules of engagement, then, it's up to you then, you know. You know what to do. You've been given your marching orders. Now, if you deviate and you leave the reservation, that's not on me. I
Yeah.
told you, do not leave the reservation. Stay on the reservation. If you veer off the reservation, then you're subject to any kind of thing
Yeah.
happening to you. Mostly bad. So that's about it. Just work on your consistency. Work on consistency.
And they can get it on Amazon. Where should they go for that
Yeah,
book?
it's available on Amazon. It's called Take the Trade. Yeah, put it up again one more time. It's called Take the Trade. It's on Amazon. Tony Wilson, and it's like I said, it's a good read. It's my brother read it in 3.5 hours. He was done front cover to back cover, and there's some
Uh-huh.
pages in there for you to take notes. I left that in there
Oh, nice.
intentionally for you to take notes and write some things down. And of course, I couldn't put 30 plus years in 128 pages. That's impossible.
That would be
But
nice.
yeah, that'd be nice, but it would be, you know, it
Yeah.
would be
A
a
chapter for
novel.
every month.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be huge. So, but I do make it informative enough that you can take the information from there and start incorporating it into your trading immediately, and it will help you with your consistency. Yeah, yeah, and it is on Amazon. They can go on Amazon.
Okay. So, time for my last question.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Drum roll. You've been trading for 3 decades.
Uh,
You've been on the floor. You've seen many successful traders, many sucky traders. You're now coaching traders. What what is like the number one piece of advice you would give to a new trader?
Number one piece of advice would be to get properly trained and trade based upon rules. Don't trade based upon anything other than specific rules, and don't
Mm-hmm.
deviate from those rules. And I was making light of it earlier about not going off the reservation, but that's what it means. I
Yeah.
have I have structure and I have rules in place, and as long as I abide by those, I do pretty good. It's the minute that I get a little bit too full of myself and I think that, oh, no, we don't need these rules today. Oh, then it comes back and it slaps you on the hand. So that's probably the number one thing, and just look for consistency, but it's got to be structured and it's got to be measurable. And you can't do random
Mm.
things and measure it. You can't measure random things.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
yeah, just like the kids on the football field, when I first got them, they had never because I inherited some of the old coaches too, And the first day, I gave them all the practice plans. I broke it down every 15-minute increments. And the coaches were looking at me like, "What's this?" It's just a practice plan. And they were like, "Well, we don't use a practice plan. We do now."
Yeah.
We leave nothing up to chance. Everything I've crafted, everything. We don't deviate from this plan. We stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with trading. Same thing. Yeah. That's it. It's simple, but it does require a lot of discipline. No seat of the pants stuff. No winging it. We don't wing it.
I think that's a very good piece of advice. Because when I first started, it took me like 2 years to realize I needed a plan. And then I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense. Like, I can't just randomly buy and sell. Yeah, that changed my trading like almost instantly.
I know. Imagine that.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I want to also say like I respect you for how long you've been trading. Um, Doing anything for that long is, I think, deserves respect, but doing like trading for that long, like trading's hard. I know you say it's easy for you, but like
No, it's not easy. It's simple.
simple.
I didn't say it was easy.
Yeah. It's simple, yeah, but
It's not easy.
it's very it's hard to do. So like I respect you for that, and thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful, and I hope it helps a lot of your listeners.
Awesome. Well, have a good night, and to everyone who is watching or listening, see you next time.